All right, here we go. So, Marcus and David, can you guys be quiet? Last unit was about arrays, a way to store a bunch of information of the same type in a single variable. And this is another way to do that. It's different, and it's called ArrayLists. ArrayLists are more powerful, you could say. So arrays are great, right? You can store a bunch of stuff. Like, remember the example with the test scores? You could have 1,000 test scores, 1,000,000 test scores. You could do things like process them, add them all up, go through and store them and do things. That's awesome. One problem with arrays is you can't make them bigger or smaller. So you create them and they are the size that they are. And array lists are different. Array lists start out empty. So when you create an array list, it's sitting there empty, and then you add things to it. So and you can subtract things from it. So you can make it bigger or smaller, and as you need to. So very, very powerful. Array lists only hold object data. So by that, I mean anything that's not primitive. So primitive data, remember, int, double, boolean. Those are the primitives we have to know for this class. There are other ones. But things that are not primitive would be like the frog class or a student class or strings. Strings aren't primitive either. Just int, double, and boolean are not object data, but there's a way we can store those values in an array list. I'll get to that in a second. So here's how you can create an array list. A little bit complicated looking. You have to say what you're putting in it when you create it. So you say array list, what you're putting in it, and then the name of the variable equals new, just like an array or creating anything. And then again, array list, and then what you're putting in it, and then you need empty parentheses at the end. There it is again. This creates an empty array list. And the object type is what goes in between the greater than or less than symbols. And we never put anything inside the parens on the far right. Let me show other examples here, just because I'm feeling it. If I wanted to do an array list of frogs, I would do that. Yeah, I should name it pond, because that's what I like to name my frog collections. Ping pong. Here's another example. It's fine. So you have to say it's an array list. You have to say what type of thing you're doing, the variable name, new, and then you say it again, and then empty parentheses over here. That's because when you create a new object with the new command, you always send over something, either nothing in the parentheses or the things you need to send over. Like if you're creating a student, you might send over the first and last name, and they'd be in that parentheses there. But when we create an array list, we don't send over any information. It gets created empty. So it is possible to create an array list like this where you don't say what it is on the right-hand side. So notice I said array list string, and over here I didn't say string. Please don't do that. I only mention it because it shows up on one of the AP classroom problems, but I'm going to mark you wrong if you don't include the type on both sides. In fact, REPL complains. It's just not it's not a big deal. So but please just say the type of object on both sides. To add things to an array list, we use the .add method. So here I'm creating this names array list, and I add 3 names. I say names.add, names.add, names.add. I'm just adding pieces of text because this is a text array list. And then unlike arrays, array lists, you can just say print. You don't have to use a for loop to print them. Notice here I just said print names, and it puts little square brackets and prints the contents. Go figure. Like all of the other things we've done in Java, array list index values start at 0. So the first one is item 0, and the last one is the length -1. And to find out how long an array list is, we use the .size method. So this does bring us to the glorious, it's the last one of these things. So if you want to know how long a string is, it's dot length with parentheses. If you want to know how long any array is, it's dot length without parentheses. And if you want to know how long an array list is, it's dot size with parentheses. So there's a reason for all of it. Dot length is a method, dot size is a method, and dot length without the thing is a property. So anyway, you can resist it or you can just accept it and memorize it. I mean, hey, why is the green light mean go and the red light means stop? I mean, we just agreed on something, and that so you can memorize things. To get something out of an array list, you have to use the dot get method. So you don't use square brackets like with an array. If you wanted item 1 out of an array list, you'd say get with a 1 after it. Remember the array I set up here, item 0 is Frankie, item 1 is Hayes, and the third item is the formal name for my dog Gilly. Anyway, so you can use a for loop. Here's a regular for loop to print everything one at a time. Int I equals 0, I less than names.size, and we're printing names.getI. Cameron.
Dot get and dot size are pretty similar to the dot length, where it's just dot that only with the prints.
Dot size is just like dot length with the prints, yeah. Dot get is different because it hands you the item at that spot. It's like using the square brackets to say score is 7, gives you the one that's at item 7. Get gives you the one that was at that spot. You can also use an enhanced for loop or a for each loop here to print that thing, string n colon names, and we just print all the strings, each one on its own line. If you want to use ArrayLists in a program, you have to import this at the top. You have to put this line at the top. Do you remember we used to have this sometimes come up with our scanners? If you want to use a scanner, you have to say import java.util.scanner, and here you have to put that at the top. I put it in the repls I'm giving you, but in case you make your own REPL and are trying to use ArrayLists, you have to put that at the top. So I said at the beginning, ArrayLists can only hold object data. That means you can't make an array list to hold int, double, or boolean values. But we do have non-primitive versions of those variable types. Remember, we learned about this in like the second unit. Integer with a capital I is a type of variable, and it is you can create an array list of capital I integers. So, and then you can just add numbers to it, just like you would. Even though this is just a regular integer, you can add it to the array list. It converts it to a capital I integer, and then when you get it back, it automatically becomes a small I int. Just if you're trying, and I do ask you to create an array list of integers, you have to do it like this. All right, well, today we've got 3 things, quick, small Google form practice, and then some practice with a string array list and some practice with an integer array list. Any questions before I turn off the recording and assign